Hey guys, welcome to the top 25 of the last 25 years in the state of Alabama. I'm here with my friend Jake Elkins, Ironclad. Jake, how's it going first? How are things?
Jason, what's up, man? Things are well here, dude. I'm super excited to be doing this. This was a lot of fun. It was so much harder than I thought to do, and it's going to be fun to talk about that and share with the fans. I love what you're doing with this. I love what you've been doing with Southeast Wrestle. I remember when you started this thing. Super cool, honor to be able to do this together with you. So thank you for including me. I'm pumped about it. We're going to have a lot of fun today, man. But thanks for
Absolutely. Well, I mean, your name for me was one of the names that's naturally I was thinking of. Number one, you're still coaching, obviously. Number two, I think it was like 2002, and you were coming in as a high school kid into Rod Gaddy's. I don't remember where it was or what it was, and we would roll around, and Seth Garvin was there, and a few others were there, and everything else. So you know this history really well.
Yeah, I started wrestling in I think the 99 2000 season. And so it's been exactly 25 years, which is kind of crazy. And it's just been a lot of fun, man. I'm too dumb to have ever left wrestling. It's just like in my blood. I was really, really terrible, but man, I just love it. And so it's been a privilege to be a part of it. We've definitely had had our hands in the dirt on it in the last couple decades. And so it's super cool. It was so much fun to go down memory lane and just remember all these different names. And man,
Yeah.
honestly, so much fun. You did a ton of research on this too. So tremendous tip of the cap for the work that you put in ahead of time. This was hard, dude. This was really hard.
Yeah, it was fun. I can't wait till you get a couple of emails from some of the people on your list. You'll be like, "You put me below him? How'd that
Oh,
happen?"
it's in there. People are gonna get their feelings hurt for sure. For sure.
All right. So before we jump off and talk a little bit about kind of your thinking of how you did this, I want to talk just real quick about Ironclad because you have established you and Warrior, Stronghold, Warrior, whatever, a few other clubs within the state have been doing some really, really cool things, man. You just got back from PNL. Give me a little bit about what we can expect from Ironclad kids this coming year.
Man, it's been so fun. That's the P&L has been really just a huge honor to be a part of. They extended an invitation, and I was like, absolutely right, just to hang out, be a part of a lot of these guys who I kind of had on a pedestal in my early days. I wanted to be like a strip matter or a Jared Lawrence or an Izzy, and so it's been so cool to be a part of that. We've had a ton of fun. Our guys are just getting what we call good data. Like it just can get you get in the muck a lot of times when you wrestle the same Alabama kids all the time. And so
Hmm.
there's rivalries, there's familiarity, there's like a lot of emotions on the line, and a little bit of that's good. Like it's great. I'm a
Hmm.
big fan of rivalry. We've tried to lean into that in the past before, but it can be it just gets challenging where it feels like it's such a small pond. Still, I mean, it's growing all the time, right? But it's still such a small town feel that there's a lot of pride, there's a lot of ego, and it feels like every match matters because everybody's going to be bantering about it. And so it's just been amazing to get outside of that and have a conversation that's purely about development and where the kids aren't distracted by the outcome or the result, right? And they can just really lean into the developmental process, and we can focus on. I mean, I hate to repeat, what Coach Saban says, but it's doing the right things the right way. We can lean into that
Hmm.
process and not about the outcome, which just honestly, it really muddies the waters. And I know it's been amazing for us, and I really suspect that people outside of our program, it's been good for too, because the other clubs, we're not there's not this like, oh, today it's the Iron Bowl today, it's all on the line. When this kid hasn't been training, he just showed up because it's like he needs to get back on the bus today, but all of a sudden everybody that's there at the tournament's judging, oh, this is the matchup, and you're like, well, this kid hadn't been training, and that goes
Right.
for us and against us, right, in those
Right.
type matchups. And so it's just been great to just kind of separate that stuff a little bit. And it's been so much fun, man. The conversation on development with those guys is terrific, and I know I'm having more fun coaching, as much fun as I've ever had, and so that's been fantastic. High hopes for everybody, but
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wishing everybody well. It should be another great season. Alabama wrestling keeps on positive trajectory, and
Hmm.
we're proud to be a part of that. But there's a lot of people that contribute to that and make it a thing, and everybody deserves their credit and respect for it. So it's pretty awesome.
So you said, it keeps getting better, and I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I remember moving from Florida to Alabama in '01 or '02 or '03, whatever year it was, and coming in and working with the Homewood kids and you and like lots of different groups. But
Yeah.
one of the things that if we turn the page here and we start talking about this top 25 of the last 25 years, how did you make some of those comparisons between somebody who might have been an hammer in 2004? It's a very different landscape. Wrestling has evolved.
Very.
So how do you make those comparisons and helped you put that into order? Did you have some kind of criteria or something?
So yeah, it was. You're right. I mean, it made it incredibly difficult. There's some different. You have to kind of timestamp. There's different eras, and one of the things that I kind of tried to look at is what were the 4 minute miles, so to speak, of those
Hmm.
times, right? Who were the Roger Bannisters of that era? They once thought that running a 4 minute mile was physically impossible for the human body to do, and so and then he proved it wasn't. Now there's kids like crazy running 4 minute miles in high school, but
Hmm.
that's not possible without a Roger Bannister, right? And so there's people I mean, you have to timestamp those things. Pre 2007, there was three divisions and it was an 8-man bracket. So getting
Hmm.
to the state tournament was honestly was so much harder. Winning a state title was harder. When you open up into more divisions or more kids at the state tournament or whatever, like a bad sectional tournament doesn't cost you the same way. And there's just a lot of differences. There's more club training, there's online training, there's
Hmm.
people, there's a culture of kids going to Fargo, going to Virginia
Hmm.
Beach, going to the USA Nationals, and that stuff just didn't exist. And so I really tried to timestamp where they were in their era. I definitely considered their high school accomplishments. There were so many. Like I couldn't believe how many 3-timers there were, and I mean it was like endless. And the 4s and 5s and 6s, it was pretty remarkable. So I tried to like take into consideration their accomplishments in high school, but really what I felt like held more value is what they're doing in college and beyond. And so you didn't
Hmm.
all the way ask all this, but time
Yeah,
stamping
no,
their
good.
achievements, and then there's also people who have finished work, and they have a completed body of work, and then
Hmm.
there's a lot of others that are still active, and so there's some athletes, especially in that are still competing. That you go, these people are unbelievably talented. There's this list changes in a year or two,
Hmm.
um, and I hope that it's always evolving. It should always be that 4 minute mile goes from one guy's done it to many, 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 right? And now somebody's run an entire marathon in 4 minute miles consecutively, right? And so that standard should keep going up. And I think this is a fun thing to evaluate every few years, really, because
Yeah.
it's going to be constantly evolving. And I think what every single person values or their perspective, their list, there's no two people are going to have the same list. But
Right,
looking at
right.
yours and mine alone is already like, okay, these are different, so it's going to be fun. What criteria did you use in making your list?
So I actually had a similar kind of mindset to you, right? The eras, kind of who was first to do certain things, like I'm gonna throw out some names, Seth Garvin going to Beast of the East, or some of the different things that were not common, and I know it's not common for you guys to go to Beast of the East now, but the number of opportunities that exist now nationally is so much higher or
So,
so much more
so
than it
different.
was back then.
If you weren't, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but
Mhm.
if you weren't a part of that era, like it's honestly so hard to understand. Like there wasn't flow, there wasn't track,
Right.
it was paper stuff. Like you found out about wrestling in a magazine. Like you were looking at people's names and you're like,
That's
oh, this
right.
kid's good. He got his picture in the magazine. Like
That's
it was just so different. And so
right.
people
A literal magazine.
literally, like you were like, oh, I got a magazine, and you'd be sitting at practice and people are flipping through looking, and you're like,
That's right.
this guy looks good because he's got a thick neck and cauliflower ear, like just a wild time, dude. Wild,
it,
wild west.
it was. And you know what? I could go back to the 80s and even further back. So we won't do that though. Um,
Go
so
ahead with your list. I'm so sorry.
yeah, no, no, no. So actually I'm glad you brought it up because I think that for me, this has been the hardest thing to communicate to people in Florida and Georgia, and that is if you're still if you're still growing, if you're still competing, and you can still rise through this list. Like you
Right.
said, it's evolving. It's not set in stone. And I think that a lot of people have a tendency to put a lot more weight on the high school accolades. I'm like you. I have a tendency to put it more on the college accolades, the big tournaments. Now that we can compare big tournaments,
Yep.
for high school wise, Fargo and that sort of thing, and then individuals like Corey who go and compete internationally and those sorts of things. So I have a tendency to kind of lean more towards that way than the high school accolades, but you can't ignore the high school accolades. And you also, this is where it becomes really difficult to make those comparisons because a lot of individuals they finish and they're in high school and they're like, I'm done, I'm good, I did my thing, I'm ready to go on and do whatever else I want to do. And it feels like, wow, how in the world do I put this person in because I just don't know where they would have gotten. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Yeah. I tried to consider like how much of a standout were they in that era? Like how different were they, right? And you said this person's name, so I'll say it too. But like Seth Garvin, who I have the most respect for, was an alien. Like
he
you
was an
couldn't
alien.
understand how it was like, no, he doesn't look like the other people. Like what's like where did he learn that, right? And it just didn't make sense. And he was a person that I looked up to, right? And I mean he's a definitely a name that goes on the he goes on the side of the mountain, right? In terms of
Mhm.
Alabama wrestling, and we'll get there, but it's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
hard to it's hard to understand. And I mean, look, to put it in perspective, if someone was the greatest undefeated middle school champion, youth champion ever, but they like didn't wrestle in high school or they stopped wrestling after their sophomore year, like you just wouldn't hold the same weight. And so to people that have that perspective of college and international and these national tournaments, like it's just no different than middle school to high school. It's that same perspective. And so
I agree.
that's the thing that I would tell people and encourage people to kind of put on a different set of glasses as you look at it. But no matter what, like I appreciate the banner. I'm sure we'll get beat up for our picks,
Yeah,
but
yeah. I've gotten
I'll
hammered.
welcome it because it's great fandom, right?
Well, and that's what I was thinking. I'm getting hammered in Florida and Georgia, but the way I look at it is, I mean, I don't know. It's my opinion, and this is kind of what I use. This was my criteria, and hopefully everybody knows, like whatever list I'm coming up with, it's never a slight against someone else. It's
Totally
completely
agree.
just trying to provide some history, some historical context for where we are. And that's, I think, one of the things I learned from doing this was how good each of these states have gotten over 25 years.
Yeah, it was like jumping off the page. Yeah, it'll hurt your feelings when I was like, okay, to be objective, I've got to here's my criteria. Here's my criteria I'm going by. And so then you're like, this is my guy. This is my guy. You're like, oh, this is my guy. You know. And so it's hard, man. It was definitely hard. I
Well,
was
let's start with at least one of your guys. It was came in on the fans boat, and we got four young men who really just finished high school or are finishing high school in the fans boat. Number 25 is Brody Christmas, who was one of your guys, right? Carson Hall, Ramburn heavyweight, now at Air Force Academy. Yanni Vines, who comes in number 23. He's now at Columbia, was at Thompson. And Yannick Simon, who has won multiple state titles up in Huntsville, comes in at 22. None of those individuals make your list or my list. It's not surprising that they come in on the fans vote because those are some pretty common names in the state of Alabama over the last several years. Would you agree
yeah,
with
they're
that?
fresh on everybody's mind, and these guys are all tremendous, right? I mean, like you said, there's no you can't slight anybody. You can't say anything negative about anybody's name that gets put on this list. Like obviously to be considered is an honor. And so I mean these guys are all studs. Know them all well, have seen them train in the practice room and the mat, grew up with some of these boys. I mean, four phenomenal wrestlers, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like
And you know what?
phenomenal.
And the future is bright. I mean,
Right.
where they end up, I don't know, but it will be interesting to see where they continue to progress.
Yeah, I mean it's really like they're all stars. They're all very striking athletes in high school wrestling, and even at the college level. A lot of these guys are extremely well versed, more tested than wrestlers from past eras, really, in a lot of ways because of the culture of competition nationally and stuff, and
Yeah.
the club scene. But their body of work is not finished, right? And so that's why they weren't on my list. I had a couple of these guys as honorable mentions on mine, but not on my top 25 because it's just is a tough list.
It's a
Tough.
tough list. And you know what? Let's go to your number 25. Somebody who pretty much right around your age, right? Did you guys graduate at the same time?
Exact age, yeah. Forrest
Yeah.
Millsap. He kicked my butt when we were in ninth grade. I think he beat me like 8'3", 8'4" or something. I still remember really well. We were 140 pounders together when I was a freshman.
Well, and he didn't get much bigger, and you got.
He stayed the same size. He wrestled 140 every year. He was tough, man. He was definitely an alien. He was one of those guys in that era. There was a couple of guys that were all trained together, and no one knew about training or anything or what was up. But he was just different, just super different. He's a great guy. He's got a kid now that I'm hoping is about to get plugged back in, and so looking forward to that. But total stud. A man of a man for sure. Yeah, I think he's a blacksmith now. Like he does all kinds of cool stuff.
Is that right?
He's a tough dude. Yeah.
Oh, that's so awesome. Yeah, no, I remember Forrest and rolling around with him a little bit and certainly a stud, especially again during that time, you went to tournaments, you knew who Forrest Millsap was, that sort of thing. So, number 24 on your list, number 25 on my list is the state's first six-time state champion, Michael Sutton out of Weaver. And, with Sutton, it's not significantly different now than it was then. In the smallest classification, right? Probably doesn't get as much love or whatever as the larger classifications do. But to win it six times, dude.
He was the first, right? He was the first. That's why he made my list and he cut off a lot of really great wrestlers. It's a different era, right? So I think I think the reason that he's not on the fans list is because one, he's from far enough back in history that a lot of people don't remember him. A lot of the guys that are coaching or just retired coaching remember him. And so he won six. Like what are you going to say, right? He was 13. 13 years old beating 18-year-olds, like you can't say anything, right? The culture Absolutely. There was not, they were not traveling. A lot of those small class kids were not as well tested nationally, mm-hmm. right? And competing stuff. It just wasn't the culture. But if this is the only tournament you ever go to and you beat everybody every single time, it's like, I don't know, man. He made people believe that six was, that more than four was even possible. And so,
yeah. And he set that standard. I don't know who was the next six timers. There's only been three, I think, in the entire state history. So, the fact that you had somebody really back almost, right at the beginning of what we considered to be in this 25 years, the fact that he was one of the few that made that, six times.
I never knew him. I still don't know him, but I remember his name as an athlete. And Michael Sutton, and I was like, he won six state titles? Like, what? And I remember as an athlete dismissing him like, oh, yeah, he's down there on that end of the arena, but whatever, dude, he won six. So like, that's a lot. That's
all right, so let's jump to number 23 on your list, and that is Stephen West. Tell me a little bit about Stephen West and why he makes your top 25.
So Stephen was dominant. He's a weird bird, dude. He's an Oak Mountain Eagle. I was in the same era as him, but he was dominant. He went from I don't think he qualified for the state tournament as a freshman, didn't start on his high school team. As a sophomore, he won state and got OW. He kept winning. He was several. He was All-American at so many national tournaments that we went to. I remember he was a national champ at one of the USA Nationals. But he was completely dominant, and he was just super technical. He would get on top and just turn people like a top, dude. It was very impressive. He wasn't impressive in any way, right? Except for his consistency and his work ethic. And man, he was dominant. He was extremely dominant. And his half brother Tanner Moon, like he kind of paved the way for
Mhm.
Tanner, and he was definitely a force in that era. And so he went on to wrestle at West Point. I
Oh
mean, he was
yeah,
that good. He went to West Point. He eventually stepped down from the team to just manage the academics. Went on to be, I mean, he's an incredible soldier and has served, and he's an incredible dude. He definitely, in my mind, belongs on the list.
definitely. Awesome. That's totally cool. All right, so let's move to your number 17. I know we're making a jump, but we're going to jump around a little bit because we've got the fans vote, we've got Jake's vote, we've got my vote. His 17 is my 23, and that is Tyler Osborne, Hoover High School, 5-time state champion. And I remember Tyler because his was back, he was back in that time as well, right?
We're the same age too. Yeah,
Yeah. And I remember it was, Scott Roar's, Hoover Bucks and Tyler Osborne was a kid that you looked around and you knew he was a force to be reckoned with.
100%. And he was competing with another guy, Ryan Romano, who's a super stud all the
Hmm.
time, right? I mean, that was an incredible battle, and I think it was probably a heated thing in Hoover country. But when Hoover was Hoover, like two a days, all this, I mean, when it was the pinnacle and Roar was running that thing, he was the guy. I remember watching him. I just started wrestling. I remember watching him wrestle one time, and I used the word alien. It was like this one doesn't fit in like the rest. Like it just didn't. There's three guys that I've ever seen wrestle in Alabama that I felt that way about, and Tyler was one of them. Um, and so I remember thinking like, dude, if I could just ever be that good, like I hope one day when I'm a junior senior like him, I could be that good. And
Hmm.
then like a few months later, I found out we were the same age, and I was just like devastated. Like, wait a second, like we're both in middle school. Like, what are you talking about?
He
I
has
was
to be
like,
like 4 years older than me. What are you
but
talking
yeah, it was
about?
very. I mean, I took that hard. I took that hard, right? And so, he was different. He didn't. He wrestled in college, quit, came back, like went to Alabama,
Hmm.
and so his body of work really got cut off. Otherwise, he was a person that the sky was the limit. I think he just kind of got bored with the sport. I mean, really, even the end of his high school career wasn't as nearly as flashy as the early years, but it was honestly because he was so much better than everyone else. It was I think it was like I feel like it's fair to say bored. He was just destroying people, and
He
it
he
was not
was
even
he was
entertaining
not
to watch.
pushed, and again we're talking about a time when you didn't necessarily go to a lot of
It was just
places
different.
and everything
Yeah,
else. Yeah.
he was
Um.
as good as anybody that's ever wrestled in the state of Alabama in high school. I mean, I would say that without really taking much debate.
Now that you're a coach, and we've talked about a few of these individuals, is there a piece of a characteristic that some of these guys on the list share that you try to imbue upon your athletes, that you try to kind of communicate to them that to be that level, these people I'm talking about had this? What was there
There's
one
there's
thing?
definitely I hate to use this word, but it's just like flashing in my head. Like they all those guys had a certain swagger about them, a confidence that came from the time that they had put in that's undeniable, right? You cannot. The only way people try to fake that before they see it on somebody else, are like, yeah, I'm gonna be that way. But the only way to earn that and own it, where you're in eighth grade and you're like the dude in the gym of high school guys, is to have earned that. Like you have to have spent the time doing the
Right.
tedious work, driving to and from practice. Like you have to commit the time, and there's just no. Um, Cal Newport has a book. It's become so good they can't ignore you, and it's like that's what it was. And so you have to have just committed time to your craft, and become that sharp. And then there's a confidence that you don't have to even like say. People just see it when you compete, and there's an immediate respect because people go, "Wow, like I want that, and I don't even know how to do it." And
Yeah.
so they definitely possessed a um a confidence that permeated the room, right?
Yeah. Well, one of the things, and I'm glad you said that time putting in because I even remember, when I coached in Florida, I coached in Orlando area, and everything was pretty close. I mean, you might have gone down to South Dade, or you might have gone over to Tampa occasionally, but I didn't really have to. We didn't really have to travel very far to have kind of the impact. And I remember coming up to Alabama and talking with Seth, and he would get in the car on Sunday morning at like 11 and drive to Arturo's, in Georgia, work out for several hours, and then drive back. And he might even come in Sunday night and have a roll around in Alabama.
Yeah.
You got to appreciate the fact that you put in that time. You better, I mean, I guess you kind of expect that you're going to
Yeah,
be,
you're putting in 8 or 10 hours on a Sunday when everybody else is like watching football or hanging out at their Meemaw's house, at the
right.
lake. Like you're like, yeah, dude. Well, I drove 3 hours in the car and I didn't have an iPad. You know what I mean? Like, right? Like
Or an
that's
iPhone.
different. That's different. Yeah, like you rode front seat with your dad in a Ford pickup on a bench seat, and trained all day.
That's
Like
right.
it was different. You know what I'm saying?
It
Like
was different.
you were roughing it, and so yeah, when you put in that time, you're like, you show up knowing I'm gonna win. Like you're not gonna beat me. Like
That's not even
there's
a consideration, right?
yeah, like you're not gonna beat me. Like and when a guy competes back and like when they fight back and make it kind of hard to win, it's like now you're having fun. It's like when the mouse runs from the cat, like the cat's having fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
no
so
doubt.
you definitely see that in that level of competitor when they put in that time. They're like, dude, I get to stretch my legs a little bit. This is going to be fun, and so it's pretty cool.
So coming in at number 21 on the fans vote is Joshua Johansson. I think that's how you say Joshua's last name, out of Weaver. I want to talk about Joshua a little bit, but I also want to talk real quick about the growth of and the quality of the small classification. I mean, has grown leaps and bounds over the last
Yeah,
20 years. And the quality of winning a state title in 1A through 4A now is really quite strong.
it really is. I mean, um, you know, prior to so we started. I don't want to interject ourselves here, but in 2016 when we started Ironclad, right? We
Yeah.
we shut down what we were doing before,
I
and
fully expect you to interject that into our
yeah,
conversation.
so we really made a commitment. Like I'm a blue collar dude from out in. I mean, my family's from Gadsden. We like whatever. Like we're not really Birmingham folks, right? And so, I really felt like, and we always disrespected. Now I think it kind of came too from some of the guys that I coached with and stuff. I felt like there was a lot of disrespect on a lot of those small teams, and one of the beautiful things about wrestling is it doesn't matter where you're from. Like if you're willing to do
Mhm.
the work, then you can be successful. Like it doesn't matter, right? And so I always I kind of identified with that, and we made an intentional effort to go recruit some of these dudes that we knew loved wrestling, and some of these communities that loved wrestling that were non-traditional, and that's really how we built. I mean, the genesis of Ironclad was a whole bunch of 4A, 5A kids. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
We didn't have any of the like traditional large school programs, and so it's super cool. I mean, I didn't have JD on my list, but I'll be honest, man, like that's super cool to see that the fans put that kind of respect on his name because coming from a program like Weaver, where Michael Sutton, again, wasn't on anybody else's list because they're from those outskirt towns. There's a lot of places in East Alabama that those people love wrestling. There's a good culture of
They
wrestling,
do.
on generational wrestlers, and so as soon as those kids get access to some quality training, they have success. And yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I'll be honest, that's super cool. If I'm JD, I'm like, you dang right, I'm on that list. Like he needs he can rub that in his sister's face. She's a couple time national champ. I made the list. What's up?
Well, the question is, in a few years, we need to put together a women's list, and I'm sure Lena will be on that list as well. Or maybe there's a younger one too, isn't there?
There's three of them. I was doing a private lesson with them last week. There's three of them. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
and they're meaner and tougher, dude. Like they're tough. Yeah.
Hey, the
Yeah,
younger ones always
JD
seem to
has
be
to
a
be
little bit
good. There's
meaner.
three girls he's got to fight with all the time. You know what I mean?
There you go. All right, so going to number 22 on my list is Colton Clark. 22 on your list is Brandon Brindley. I'll talk real quick about Colton Clark. Scottsboro hammer. Like, I mean,
Super stud.
I think he made the state podium 5 or 6 times, 3 times state champ. Went away to Virginia Tech. Is he back wrestling somewhere
I
other
think
than Virginia Tech now?
I,
You know?
to my knowledge, he's still at Virginia Tech. He
Okay.
might not be. To my knowledge, he's still there. Listen, Colton is a hammer. He look, he's never been one of my guys. We've been around them when we do Team Alabama stuff and stuff. He's a Warrior guy through and through, and they made the commitment to. I mean, they've commuted for years to drive down. I mean, it was a Seth Garvin type, commitment, like we were talking about those old days going to Georgia and stuff. And Scottsburg's in the middle of nowhere, man. They've had a lot of great wrestlers, but he didn't train there. He trained everywhere else. And Colton is tough, dude, and he's a kid. I mean, his family is of means. Dad does well, but he did not take the soft approach. Like his dad raised a tough boy, and I have the most respect for Colton.
I
I don't even know if he
agree.
knows that, but he's a tough kid. He's been fun to watch over the years, and he puts it on the line. It's really cool to watch.
Well, I'll tell you, he was one of the kids that when an Alabama kid leaves and goes to a D1 program, and it's not even an Alabama kid, it's a Southeast kid,
Yeah,
right? One, you're always cheering for them. You always want them to do well. But number
100%.
two, you also look at it and you go, how are we going to do? Because it's a different level, right?
Yeah,
And the fact that Colton went to Virginia Tech and has wrestled matches for them. He hasn't made the Division 1 national tournament or anything like that yet. But he's in there competing in the room. Just just makes me feel good about the quality and level of competition that we've
yeah.
seen in the Southeast and in Alabama.
And
It's
that's
so
that's
cool.
success, man. Like, look, you go get in the Division 1 room and survive 4 years, 5 years. Like that guy's tough, dude. That's a cowboy. You know what I'm saying? You've earned your
Absolutely.
stripes, dude. And so, if you go through Division 1 room for a year or two, I mean, you're about it. You know what I'm saying?
You go through a
You might,
college room, man. I mean, let's
yeah.
let's talk about the college room too. But a D1 room is a little bit different. But yeah, I mean it's totally cool. All right, so let's go to Brandon Brindley, who also went to a D1 room, didn't he? Didn't he go to
Yep, yep. Wrestled
SIUE?
5 years at Southern Illinois, Edwardsville. Man, Brandon was an Alabama wrestler to the T, dude. He grew up. His dad. I still remember his dad and his little brother. His dad, him, and his little brother, like they were at every tournament.
They were,
They would
yeah.
wrestle 4 brackets every Saturday and beat everybody. And he was like, they were looking like kids showed up from out of state. They knew he was there. They're like, hey, kid, what's your name? Like, this kid's tough. Hey, what, you want to wrestle an exhibition? We'll wrestle you. Like, dad had a big chew in. Like, man, they were tough, dude. They were Alabama, salty, and like, on the edge at times. But dude, I loved it. And Brandon wrestled that way. He was intense. He would like beat you up on the way to scoring 15 points. It wasn't
Yeah,
like
he
he was.
would.
I mean, it was definitely you felt like you had been in a fight. When a Division 1 guy puts hands on you, like it, and he was doing that in like middle school, dude. He was just tough. Like before he was technical at all, he was tough. And
Yeah.
man, he thugged it out. He wrestled 5 years at Southern Illinois, Division 1 level.
Yeah.
He's a total stud, total stud.
I
Great
think
guy, great good person.
is he
Um,
now a professional singer?
Dude, he plays music. He like plays the banjo and like the
Does he?
mandolin and
That's
like
what I
all these
thought.
instruments. He's very like Johnny Cash blues. He's a character, dude. He marches to the beat of his own drum and does what he wants, dude. And if you could he competed that way too. It's like, hey, if you don't like it, do something about it, but you couldn't. And he's a very cool character, great guy. I had the privilege of getting to grow up kind of around him. He was a couple years younger than me, but my brothers were wrestling in that time with him. And so I got to see him all the way through. We went and stayed with him one time and went to NCAAs when it was in St.
Oh, is
Louis.
that right?
And he's just a great dude, man. Really cool guy and a heck of a competitor. Heck of a competitor. Yeah.
All right, so let's move to number 18 on the fans vote, 20 on my vote. Didn't make your list.
Man, this was tough. This is tough. He's gonna beat me up for this.
Eric
He was on my
Shackles.
honorable mention. This is hard. This was I had a couple of my dudes, and I'm like, man, I don't like. I was like, look, I wrote my criteria. This is it.
Yeah.
He was one of I had like 5, 6 guys on the honorable mention list. It was just really, man, it's crazy hard to make that cut. Eric was a dog. I got to coach him in high school at the club for a little while. I wasn't a part of his early years. I obviously saw that. but
Well, he's
got to
another
train
Muscle
with him.
Shoals Scottsboro kid, right? Like he's
Yep,
up,
yep.
yeah, in that neck of the woods. Yeah.
He and he was like really a young leader. He had a lot of influence on some kids younger than him, the Joe Greens of the world and stuff. And
Yeah. Hmm.
um, he was a stud, man. He was a lightweight guy. And so a lot of times he was like the old guy wrestling kids younger than him and stuff. And I felt like that kind of counted against him in some ways. I mean, he went to Edinburgh and wrestled, and I mean wrestled there several years. I think he was, you know, I think he was like on the team, decided to sit out a year, then came back and some of that stuff. But dude, he's tough, man, super tough.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of respect for him. He's back in coaching now,
He is.
and I know he's super active on social media. I know he's
He
always.
is.
I'm I don't consume a lot of social media, although we have a huge presence. And so, but I hear his name often from others who are like, "Hey, you know, Shankle said this and this," and man, look, I was in the trenches with that guy. A lot of respect. It hurt me to not for him not to be on the cutoff of the
I,
25. I
actually,
feel like there was
as I was looking through the list, I was thinking to myself, that's somebody who's going to give you a hard time.
it was that hurt honestly. There were some other guys that I feel like that got super overlooked. You know, some of the Forrest and the Suttons and whatever. It was
Yeah.
time stamping his era. What he did was remarkable all the way through.
Yeah. It is what it is. You got to make a
It is
list,
what it
man.
is. Yeah, like, but dude, competitor. I mean, I think about Fargo camps and getting ready for nationals and different stuff, and I can think of war story matches that he had where he was a dog. Like he's a dude. He definitely is deserving of being in those there on the list, and I'm not surprised that everybody else had him there.
So, one of the things that actually, I think he's a good example. This is a question for you and the way you were thinking about it. So, for the those of you that don't know, Eric was a four-time state champ, three-time at 106 pounds, once at 113 pounds. Do you think that there's a little bit of am I wrong? Was that
Well,
right?
that's what I was about to question. Was he 4 or 5? I was thinking he was 5, but
He
maybe it
might,
was 4.
he might be five. You know what,
He was
Eric?
listen. He was one of those
If
guys
we're
that got this
wrong, like
4 minute
you can let me know.
introduction. He was one of those guys that got the 4 minute introduction at the state tournament. And from Scottsboro, Alabama, you know, if you've been to the Alabama state tournament, you know.
So okay, but
Go ahead.
regardless,
I'm sorry.
regardless, do you think that when we're making this list, there's a bias against 6 pounders and a bias against 285 pounders, and we kind of gravitate towards the middle? I think that happens.
I think so too. Yeah, 100%. There's that bell curve if you graph it right, and if you're on the edge on either side, there's definitely some bias against it,
Yeah.
right? And I think that hurts him a little bit. It's not his fault. He can't control that. He won. You know what I mean? But he was a lot of people kind of saw him as being small class, and he really, I you know, he can correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of his national competition didn't really begin until he was like a junior in high school. Like I think that junior and senior years when he had won endlessly, right? Growing up winning everything else, but his junior and senior years when he really jumped on the national scene.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was not as like battle tested nationally up until that point, although again, I mean, was a total warrior. But I think to your point, I think there is a lot of bias against that. If you either are on the edge in either way, if you did not compete nationally as much or have those accolades or like college, whatever.
One of the things that stuck with me was that I mean, a lot of people, even if you go and wrestle in college, you have a tendency to stick pretty close to home. And he wasn't one that did that. I mean, Edinburgh's
totally
like a completely different place than
different.
Alabama.
No, it's super different. Hey, dude, it's different. Yeah, when you can't go home, like that's different. And that may sound crazy to people, you know, not from Alabama. The Alabama culture is like it was a big deal. I mean, I remember making that decision myself. I'm like, this is a factor.
Yeah, no, definitely. All right, so let's move to number 21 on your list, number 20 on the fans vote. I have him at number 14, but I think we all have him behind his brothers, Michael Cuthbertson. So you know, I mean, how many state titles are sitting in a Cuthbertson's like house?
I want to say,
is it like
it's
18
like
or something? 23? Okay.
I think there's 23 between 5 brothers or
I
20,
mean,
21, 22, it's something like that. It's in the 20s.
it is
Um,
ridiculous.
3 of them have 15. I think there's a 3-timer and
And
then
then a
like
two
a
timer. I thought it was a
2-timer. I
two
think it's
timer.
20.
Yeah. Anyway, you guys can correct us if I'm wrong, but Michael was a 5-timer. Again, back during the time, 01, 02, all that. Went away to Boise State. It went back when they had a wrestling program,
Yeah.
and everything else. But if I remember, I mean, the thing that stuck with me is, again, the Cuthbertson name was a name. There are a
Feared,
few names within the
feared,
state of Alabama, and that was a name, right?
feared. They were definitely a pioneer family in Alabama wrestling. They were a staple, and I don't care what area you're in. Like anybody that knows. And I'll tell you what, more than I mean, he was skilled. He wrestled. He had a slick high crotch that was just like, I don't even know how you do that. But he looked the part, dude. He looked. I mean, that Joker looked like John Cena walking onto the mat. Like I remember, he was. So when I was a sophomore, I was a 160-pounder, and he wrestled 171. Wrestled my teammate Eric Benson, who
Oh
was
yeah,
also
yeah, yeah.
on my total list. And I mean, dude, he just was a mammoth human. I was like, that's a weight class up. Like it might as well be 3, Like,
I'm
woo!
not going there.
Yeah, cutting weight never felt so good. You know what I mean? He was a 5-timer, super stud, really, really put together. I mean, and a part of a legacy with his family. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, very
Absolutely.
deserving of being on the list.
All right, so let's move to number 20 on your list, 16 on my list. He comes in at number 7 on the fans vote. Zachary Van Alst. Is Zachary, do you know if he's still at the Air Force Academy?
No, he wrestled at Air Force,
Okay.
transferred, wrestled at Coker Division II in South Carolina.
Oh,
My
that's
one of
right.
my
That's
former
right.
teammates was actually the head coach there, and he was an All-American there, Division II
I
level.
forgot about that.
And
Right.
now he's back in coaching. He's coaching in Prattville, and I tell you what, every coach blows me up. They're like, "Hey, man, can I get Zach's number?" Like he's the hottest commodity right now. People wanting to hire him in to be a high school coach. He's down there in John Hayden country. He's
Mm-hmm.
man, Zach is a stud. I got to be a part of his journey. I had the privilege of getting to coach him and be a part of him. Incredibly talented and extremely like you walk out in the gym before practice and he's like draining 3-pointers.
Oh,
You're like,
really?
what? There's just a freak athlete, backflips, you name it. And usually a talented kid like that is not as tough. Usually they lack toughness, right? They're like, you're really physically gifted, but if you're gifted and you're skilled, then you're not tough. And man, he just had it all. He was like 4th in Fargo at junior 145. Like
Yeah, I remember that.
that's
Yeah.
that's the middle of the bell curve, dude. That is a meat market, and um, super stud. He went to Air Force. Ultimately, he could have stayed there and wrestled. He would have made the lineup, and I mean he
Yeah.
ultimately decided he left because he was just like, hey, like the academics are so strenuous. I'm actually not getting to like wrestle at the level that I want to. I can't focus on wrestling and my love for the sport. And it's the only reason he transferred. It wasn't because he couldn't hack it. And bright kid, insane ACT, 6-time state champion, right?
6 time.
6 times, one of 3. Man, he's a total dog, dude. You can't, if you got anything bad to say about Zach Van Alst, you're gonna have to come through me first. He's tough.
All right, so then the question is, why'd you put him at 20?
Well, yeah,
I'm
I mean,
kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
no,
I'm
really,
kidding.
I mean, this was one of those things I was like, he didn't
No,
have,
to be fair, right? I mean, like it's a tough decision of where to
so
put these
hard.
people to everyone. I don't hate the fact. I think 7 by the fans is a little high, personally. I had him at what, 16. You had him at 20, but again, you know, I could make an argument, especially
I could, people could
except for
jump
like
5
what?
spots
How
like
many
that.
times did
Like,
you change it?
man, I drafted my list 3 times. The first time I wrote my list, I was just going down. There's like, I don't know, 675 names or something. When
Right.
I got to his name, like halfway down the list, I wrote top 10. Like I was trying to assign some numbers,
Mm-hmm.
and I wrote top 10. And then when I refined it again, I think I still had him at like 12 or 9. I don't even remember now. I started like color coding him, like this guy's in, and then once I guess I really did like 4 drafts of it to be if I'm really honest about it. And man, when I started just considering all the factors, it was just putting respect on some other guys' names. I think he was the benefactor of like kind of a different of like a generational change, a new era.
Hmm.
I think because if he's 3 years earlier, he's like 7, 8, or like I think you know what I mean. Um, just when I look at some people, the influences, the outliers in that era, it was. But again, like if somebody like I don't I'm not mad at 7, not mad at that number at all. I'm like, yeah,
Right.
makes sense.
All right, so let's jump to 13 on your list, 19 on the fans vote, 21 on my list. Was Jordan, was he a teammate of yours, a college teammate of yours?
He wasn't. He
He
came
wasn't.
in the year after I left, I think.
Okay. Okay.
He
So
came in the
Jordan
year after I
Simpson,
left.
everyone.
So Jordan was another kid, kind of like Brandon Brindley. Man, they grew up. Dad's blue collar dude. I think he's a framer. He's pretty outspoken. He's like, look, dude, I'm tough. I like fighting. Like that. His dad's got a great persona, and his boy embodied it. He was a Kid Rock type character. And some other dad might be mad about the way his dad was, or the way that kid was with some swagger, but nobody could stop it. I mean,
Hmm.
they were part of this little posse that would, yeah, man, show up. Hey, you want to wrestle? Sick, go toe that line, and you just get a beating. And I tell you what, he stopped with some eligibility left wrestling.
Mm.
The only reason that he's really that low on my list is because his body of work got cut off. He was an All American in
He
college.
was an, yeah, D2 All American
He's a Division two
at
All
Newberry,
American
right?
at Newberry, my alma mater, and um, but like he has a win over Brandon Womack in high school, right? Of like
Oh.
one or two losses I think that Brandon like had in high school.
Woo.
So like that's a yeah. When you say that, you're like, oh, he was good, and he's got a lot of wins over people that are kind of famous in wrestling. He had some wins over those guys growing up, and really tough. Yeah, dude. I mean, skilled, hard. I mean, tough. Same
Yeah.
thing. I think he probably was a victim of like not being pushed. Like he was just win, and he was definitely a gamer. You could be mad at him in practice, maybe his practice habits, and he would Allen Iverson that thing all day long, like talking about practice. You know, show up and put it on people, and so a lot
So
of respect for him. He was cowboy. Um, I think my old head coach recruited him, and he would just call me just pissed about the next thing, whatever they were bickering about, in college. He was like, "This kid's so good, Jake." It's like he's so good. I'm like, I know, man. I know he's good. He's tough.
all right, so jump into 19 on your list, 17 on my list. Didn't make the fans vote, which I was a little surprised about. Is that just a matter of like when he wrestled? Keaton
I don't know, man.
Thompson.
Do people just not know him? Like, I don't know.
I don't know. How do people not know who Keaton Thompson is?
Keaton was as dominant as you could be in high school. Same thing. Look, not talented, not like anything. He wouldn't start in any other sport. He's a year younger than me, or maybe 2 years younger than me. He was in that Stephen West area. We were in the same wrestling room, and dude, he got just abused by our coach at the time. But he was a product of that stuff, and he found a way. He kind of changed the stars. Went to college. He wrestled at Ohio State.
Yeah,
He wound up wound up not finishing there, and I think his life kind of went a different direction. But
right.
in terms of wrestling, whoo, buddy, same thing. Like you knew you'd been in a fight. He was technical. He was tough. He had a win over multiple NCAA All Americans. Brennan Brown, who's the one of the guys from Penn State that was wrestling there. It was like third NCAAs. Like he like majored him or something. Like he was good, dude. He was super good. Uh, yeah. I mean that Joker,
How did you make
mad.
how do you make the comparison between like say or is there a comparison to be made like an NAIA champ, a D2 All American, an NCAA Division One qualifier? For me, and I'm just gonna throw this out there, like making the lineup in NCAA Division One is this is not shade on any other collegiate level, but making a lineup is extremely difficult.
It's
Being a
super tough.
four-time D1 qualifier at that national tournament, the best tournament, like the single best tournament, like around. Like, I mean, it's just unbelievably the talent level of those individuals. How did you kind of think about when you were making some of those college comparisons? Because Keaton went away to D1, but he didn't ever really do anything at Ohio State.
Yep.
And yet you've got D2 Jordan Simpson, who you have higher than him, was a D2 All-American. So was that the accolades kind of come into play when you were
Yeah,
thinking about it or
I
not?
think so. So the college accolades had a lot of weight. Again, I kind of when it at the point that it gets kind of murky and subjective, I started thinking about how much did they stand out. Like as a
Hmm.
fan, were you like, hey, watch, hey, you're elbowing the guy beside you. Hey, watch this guy right here, Russell, right?
Right.
Um, and so I think, I mean, so baseline, okay, a Division I national qualifier is comparable to a Division II All American, which is comparable to more like a finalist or a champ at lower levels. Okay, I'm gonna say top three, right? We'll say top three. We're a one loss or no loss guy at the NCAAs at the Division III NAIA level and beyond. I got a lot of data to build that off of, personal experience, other people, or whatever else. Now you could be above that, right? The guy that is, I mean, I got when I was in college, some of the guys that I was competing with majored the guys that won NCAAs at Division I level, right, or whatever. I mean, there's different, like you can finish higher than that, right? But it's really about depth, and I think that
Hmm.
people would probably understand that more when you look at like large class, middle class, small class divisions in states. It's not that the level of wrestling falls off at the top. There's just not as much depth, right? And so
Right.
a Division I lineup. I mean, like our Division II team, for instance, in college, we beat a bunch of Division I teams. We beat North Carolina. We beat NC State. Like we had Rutgers and all these people back out of duels with us. Like we had that was kind of the exception, not the rule. Um, those Division I lineups are all like, I mean, they're all hammers. They're all hammers. They're all right. And so maybe you beat that guy, maybe he beats you, but it's competitive at that level, right? And so
Right.
we had a team full of national qualifiers that were starters, but our second guy would fall off maybe more than the Division I level, right? Or maybe the second level is comparable, but third level, like we got nobody, and their third guy is as good as their second guy or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
really
Okay.
a depth issue.
Yeah. I was just curious because we've had some conversations as it relates to it and kind of how it plays in. And I just was curious.
It's hard. Like
Yeah. All right. So number 19 on my list didn't make your list, did not make the fans list. Kade Kitchens. Your neck of the woods, you just said Gadsden, right? Wasn't Kade a
yeah.
Southside Gadsden kid?
He was tough. He was tough. I think he wrestled against my brothers some growing up. I think they like I didn't put my brothers on the list. I mean they were on my long list. They didn't make the top 25.
Oh,
Kade
that's
was
another one
tough.
that's gonna get you in trouble, but
Yeah,
that's okay.
they're gonna be saucy about that 100%. Yeah. Yeah, my Matt will the same thing, just body work, they stopped, right? But they're good.
Yeah.
Um
Well, and Kate
yeah,
went over and was a D2 All American at shorter.
you
Um,
know, and I saw that when I went back at the list and was like, you know what, man, like my man, he was an All American there, and I had
well,
forgotten about that, to be
and
honest.
he didn't make the choice, I don't think, to quit. Shorter dropped their
He dropped the
program.
program, right?
So it's
I
not
think
a
Michael John brought that to my attention, and so I was same thing. I was like, dang, like yeah, maybe he does need, maybe he deserves to be on the list. Like I didn't, um, I probably had a bias myself because my brothers had competed with him, and like
sure.
I just knew like kind of they were all in that same window, and so
Yeah.
I put him kind of in that class with them, but he was an All American Division II level, and so
Well, if you put him on
maybe he
and you didn't
deserves to
put
be
your
on the
brothers
list.
on, you're probably like looking for trouble there. I'm just saying.
Yeah, that'll be a fight at Thanksgiving for sure, or on the mats tomorrow when we roll jujitsu, right? So
So let's go to a guy that's on your list but not on my list, and that's Nick Hall. Number 16 comes in. Thompson high school hammer. I mean, honestly, why does Nick make the list at 16 for you?
So Nick was a three-time champ. He was Fargo All-American a couple times.
Hmm.
Um, Wrestled all the way through. The most unimpressive. Okay, so I got to coach him. So number one, I have a picture on my phone somewhere of him on the podium above Jaden Cox and Kyle Snyder. Okay, now they were in
What?
like I have a picture. He's on the podium and the guys like he won and the guys in like third and fourth or third and fifth, whatever, lower on the podium is Kyle Snyder and Jaden Cox. So nobody knows that, but that's a true story, okay? The other major data point, I mean he was
Maybe I need to amend my list.
unbelievably good. Okay,
Yes, he
unbelievably
was.
skilled. Went to App State. He was just like, dude, my girlfriend is gonna make a lot of money, and I'm going to like I'm following her. Like, and he is. He's living it up. He's a dude. Nick is awesome. So much fun. Um, I had we went to Super 32. The quick story on Nick Hall. We went to Super 32. He wore a Brute, the reversible singlet that you could get. It was red on one side and blue on the other.
That's what
And
I
it was
wore when I was in high school.
Dude, it was like the original singlet. Okay, he shows up.
Was it like
He's got
burlap?
50 singlets, 50 of them, and he's wearing this thing. I was like, Nick, what are
What are
you
you
doing, bro?
doing?
What
Yeah.
are you doing? He looked like dopey. He's like he could have been three weight classes down. He makes the semis of Super 32. Okay, when Super 32 is a thing. Okay, like this is not how long ago, and he loses on this sketchy takedown in the semis of Super 32. Jody Strip Matters in the corner. Okay, and he gets taken down. He's got his hand on the table, like his arms up on the table, and he stops wrestling, then he falls, and the referee awards two with like 30 seconds to go in the match. And I was pissed. I was so mad. And like he was totally beat. He was like stalling. This guy's on us, but it's like 1-1 is the score. Okay, I think that's right. I think it was 1-1, and he loses the match. Okay, that guy's name is Jason Nolf. Okay, and so it was this wormy little dorky dude that I was like, who's this little skinny run? Like all I knew was my
Wow.
guy because I was working out with him every day, and we were doing private lessons before and after practice and all stuff, and so he was. Nobody knows they sleep on him. He was a dude.
I know. I love the stories. I wish I knew all those stories. That's awesome. That is
Yeah,
so
super
awesome.
cool.
All right, so let's go to a fellow warrior, or Thompson warrior, and
Yeah.
James Latona, who makes the number 17 on the fans vote. Does not make your list or my list. I think probably doesn't make our list for the primary reason of his body of work is not finished yet.
He's going to be on this list. He's going to be. I believe Friendly's going to be on this list. James is a stud. He's the dude. I'm super excited to see the next few years from him
Hmm.
because he will be on this list. His body works is not finished, and
Yeah.
and um and he is not going to have peaked in high school. Like I just don't. I think his best years are ahead of him, and I'm like he can be as good as he wants to be, and he's got all the raw ingredients. It's literally just a thing of decisions, and I believe he will be on that list. He just wasn't on mine right now, but again, it's an income. His body work is not done right, and so um, I'm very hopeful. Listen, I'm a fan, right? He doesn't represent my
Yeah, no,
club.
right.
He's an Alabama boy, and I'm a fan of that. So all
Absolutely.
respect to his coaches, his dad, his family. James is tough.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to finish up with number 18 on your list, number 15 on the fans vote list, and number 18 on my list, and that is JD Henderson. What is it about JD Henderson? I mean, obviously, we all put him, in the same spot.
Yeah, I mean so JD. I'm trying to look at the thing here. He's a three-time state champ, but I'm pretty sure he was a national champ in college.
I believe so. Yeah, and I don't know
Yeah,
that it was on there, but I think he a JUCO national champ or a D2 national champ.
I'm not positive. I have it. I wrote down that he was a D2 champ.
Hmm.
I'm not positive, but listen, JD is tough as nails. I remember him wrestling for forever. I know that he was a national champ in college. And listen, I just remember him competing, and he was like Stonewall Jackson. Like you weren't going through that guy. I mean, he was JD is a brick house, and
He was.
he's the dude. He's one of the realest. You talk to him, you're like, that's a man. And I just put some respect on my dude's name. He's tough. Never trained with him, just watched him wrestle. Always thought he was incredibly dominant in the way he competed, and he left a mark. When the match ended, you would be talking about it, right? You're just like
Yeah. Yeah.
one of
Yeah.
those people that caught your eye. Was not flashy, but was dominant. He got the work done and did it on his own terms. And so when you have that level of success in high school and that level of success in college, I mean, you got to be there, right? And he finished the race. He kept wrestling, and so I
Yeah.
think was very deserving and represents a program there in Arab that's very storied. Arab and Grissom too, I believe. I think he had
Yeah.
a little time in both, and yeah, very deserving.
Well, I'll also say this. I think JD he has a few fans out there as well because I got a couple emails that said you need to make sure JD Henderson's on the list. Like
Yeah,
it's
he's a strong leader. I listen. He's a fan. Anybody that meets him is a fan. Okay, so he's a total stud, and it's cool. It's interesting that he came in at 18 for both of us and 15 in the fans. It makes me think that's probably right about where he deserves to be.
yeah,
So
it's kind of interesting how it all kind of works out a little bit, you know.
yeah.
All right, so you're gonna notice that there's a couple spots missing for the fans. I think there's a spot number 24 on my list. The reason that that's missing is because he comes in much higher on Jake's list, but we're not gonna reveal that in this show. We're gonna wait until the next show so that we can talk about him in greater detail and maybe why there's such a discrepancy between yours and mine and that sort of thing. So, anyway, so that is 16 to 25. As we wrap this up, how much fun was it to do
Oh,
this?
dude, so much fun. This is cool. We need more fandom like this on wrestling, right? People love it. I think people want this stuff, and what an exciting thing. And I mean, how many conversations about wrestling are going to happen because of this? Because you know this guy, and it's such a fun thing. It takes you down
Yeah.
memory lane.
And
I literally,
how wrong you are and how wrong I am.
yes, 100%. Oh, it's going to be so good. I can't wait. I can't wait. This was so fun. It took me, so Jason asked me for a list, and I was like, oh yeah, man, I'll hammer that thing out, like no worries. And I started doing, I was like, ooh, it's kind of a lot. And I was like, yeah, man, I'll get it to you on this day. And then I was like, hey, I'm not done. Like it kept. I waited to the 11th hour. I was like, okay, here you go. And it was very difficult to do. Not to make a list, but the more you try to do it well, the harder it is. But so much fun. It was so cool to just I honestly kind of love that it took so long to do it because it allowed me more time to go
Think
down
about
memory
it.
lane and think
Yeah.
about some of these guys and cool memories and moments that really stood out. And I think that's the big thing that's fun is for anybody that's a fan that's listening, that's looking over this list, they're going to remember those moments. And I think that would be really cool stuff to share of, hey, I remember a moment. I remember this thing
Hmm.
because maybe you were older looking down or maybe you were a young guy looking up.
Hmm.
I shared my list with Michael John, who handles all of our media, and he's been around the game for a long time too. And it was
Hmm.
really cool to hear his perspective because he was so much younger, how he looked up to a lot of these guys and they were kind of more on a pedestal than some of the people that are right behind him. And I thought that was very interesting and telling of the perspective that we all have.
Yeah.
And man, I just encourage everybody to, hey, beat us up, drop comments,
That's
let
right.
us
Have
know
fun.
what you're like. Hey, this was our list. What is your list? I would love to see everybody's because it's just more conversation and honestly, just so much fun.
All right, Jake. Well, as we finish this up, we'll come back maybe in a week or so, do the next list, and then finish it up with the last five or so. A lot more names still to talk about. I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a busy man with everything that's going on in Ironclad and everything else. So thanks for joining me, man.
Jason, thanks for putting this together. Thanks for letting me be a part of it. So much fun. You're the best, dude. Keep doing all the work you're doing.
Thanks, man. See you.
Later, brother.